Okay, so in October last year, you disclosed your personal Bitcoin holdings. Do you continue to buy Bitcoin personally?
Well, I can say that I've never sold a Bitcoin, and then from time to time, I consider the matter again. Um, but I still have all that Bitcoin, and I haven't made any other announcements about future acquisitions of Bitcoin, but I may.
Okay, so do you think there's any correlation between what is happening in China with Evergrande and Bitcoin?
I think that over the long run, no. Uh, right now, Evergrande's got a bunch of debt, and they probably can't pay it all back. So there's, I don't know, I guess a lot of short-term dislocation in the markets. But I mean, the big idea or the most important point to be made here is that most corporations' balance sheets are composed of cash and credit, and cash is crumbling and credit is crumbling. Cash is losing 15 to 20% of its value every year. And credit is like a bond. And if those bonds are yielding 2 or 3 or 4% interest, then they have a 2% default risk. And if they're losing 15% of their purchasing power every year, then you can see the negative real yields on credit are minus 15%. And the negative real yields on cash are minus 15%. So, I think that the most important idea is that corporations would do well to actually convert their cash and credit into Bitcoin. And that's what we've done.
We saw a price movement this week that coincides with ongoing concerns with Evergrande. Do you think there's a direct correlation between Evergrande and Bitcoin price action?
I'm not a trader. So like the truth is, I'm not buying Bitcoin to trade it every minute or every hour or every day. I'm buying it to hold it for a decade, between a decade and 100 years. So yeah, I mean, the price changes every minute, and it changes every minute based upon what the Federal Reserve says, or what the White House says, or what the Chinese government says, and the like. But I don't have a particular opinion one way or the other. And I don't think that people should really focus upon near-term dislocations when they're investing in Bitcoin. If you're not going to hold Bitcoin for 10 years, you probably shouldn't buy it for 10 minutes, in my opinion, because it is volatile, right? The markets are trading 24/7, 365, and Bitcoin is plugged into the other crypto markets, and the other crypto markets have huge amounts of leverage in them. So if you have lots of leverage trading with thin liquidity, it's always going to be reacting to some random news this way or that way. I think it would be a mistake to attempt to correlate a positive or a negative to something, because that's a kind of a trader's mentality. And I think 99% of the people aren't really equipped to be traders. It's a very dangerous game and induces great deals of anxiety.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about the regulators for a minute. Do you believe stablecoins will be treated as a commodity or a security?
I think they're likely to become securities. I think that the SEC has been pretty clear, and they're saying that most cryptos are securities. Bitcoin is not. Bitcoin is a commodity, and it's pretty clear the consensus is Bitcoin will be a commodity. There's speculation that there's a few other crypto tokens that are commodities, but they haven't been named explicitly. The only one that's explicitly designated as a commodity is Bitcoin. I think that stable coins look like money market funds. Like if you give me $50 billion and I give you 50 billion in tokens, and then I invest the $50 billion into a bunch of bond instruments or credit instruments, then I'm taking risk with the 50 billion. If I were to, for example, invest the $50 billion into Evergrande bonds, and the bonds were to crash by 75%, then the $50 billion of stable coins would become $15 billion or $12 billion of stable coins. And so the SEC and the regulators have a point, which is when you're buying a stable coin, you're probably you're entering into an investment contract, and there is risk. And that means that you would want to know how that capital is invested. If I gave you 50 billion and you put it into a bank account yielding 0% interest in US dollars, that's a much less risky asset or balance sheet than if I took the same 50 billion and bought GameStop. I mean, you could do anything in between. So yeah, I think that they will be deemed as securities, especially the centralized ones.
Okay, so from our research, at one time you were a Bitcoin skeptic, and now you are an investor and advocate for Bitcoin. Could you walk us through what made the light go off for you to become a Bitcoin bull?
Yeah, I think that is such a radical new idea that unless you have a need for the solution and you have a lot of time to spend to understand how Bitcoin works, it's easy to brush it off or arm wave it off. The thing that caused me to embrace Bitcoin was in March of 2020, the global economy came to a grinding halt, and it was pretty clear to me that the world wasn't going to just bounce back to the same thing that it had been 15 days later. And when the Federal Reserve and the central banks of the world started to expand the money supply at a very aggressive rate, what we saw was a K-shaped recovery. Wall Street recovered very quickly within a matter of weeks. Main Street didn't recover and still hasn't recovered. And our company was sitting on top of about $500 million of capital, primarily invested in cash and credit. And when it became clear that what we had was $500 million that was going to yield 0% interest, probably for the next 4 years, and it also became clear that it was going to be increasingly difficult to do business as an operating company, we had to look to other ideas. And so we discovered Bitcoin because we wanted to find a way to not see the $500 million debased away. At a 20% monetary inflation rate, then the $500 million would be cut in half in 3 years. And so we had a problem in March of 2020. It became very clear. Before March of 2020, for the previous decade, monetary inflation rates ran about 7% in the Western world. So it was a nagging issue, but not a mortal or a terminal disease. I think that after March of 2020, ignoring it became much more difficult to do.
Okay, so let's talk about MicroStrategy. The company's legacy software business is enterprise intelligence analytics. Does this tie into Bitcoin, or are there plans for MicroStrategy to at some point create software that surrounds Bitcoin?
We always think about these things. About a year ago, we had a $500 million business growing about 0% a year, and we had a $500 million balance sheet paying 0% interest. And then we got into Bitcoin, and that $500 million balance sheet paying 0% interest became a $5 billion balance sheet growing much faster. Bitcoin's growing 130% a year on average for a decade. So we all of a sudden have a very big Bitcoin business. The $500 million enterprise software business is now growing about 10% a year. So we were able to get a boost on the business intelligence software business by entering Bitcoin. And I think the reason why is because it boosted our brand by a factor of 100. It boosted our credibility with all the CXOs and all of our customers by a factor of 10. It was really great for employee morale and employee retention. It cut our attrition rates dramatically. And if you're an employee and you're holding stock or stock options and the stock increases by a factor of 5 over 12 months, then that's motivational. You feel like you're winning. So it became easier for us to recruit and easier for us to retain all of our talent. And then we got this great new set of channels on Twitter and YouTube where we could get our message out 100x greater, 100x cheaper. So I would say Bitcoin is a benefit to the core business. It's a second order benefit. It's a first order benefit to our balance sheet and our shareholders. And the two of them have worked out well together as a complement.